In the beginning, when we start learning songs, a lot of people will start at the top of the song and they'll work through note by note all the way through until the bottom of the song. And then they'll go right back up to the top and they'll work through note by note again all the way through to the bottom of the song. And then they wake up the next day and they don't remember it. A much better way would be to break the song into smaller pieces that are easier for our brains to handle. We have the A part of a tune that repeats twice before it goes on to the B part. Or we have the verse of a song that goes into a chorus and then goes right back into another verse. So most songs are logically broken up into smaller, more manageable sized pieces anyway. But we can actually break it down further and work on even smaller pieces that are easier for our brain to handle and stick in our memory longer. The first thing that we want to do is to look at the overall structure of the song and see what all parts are there that we have to learn. If we look at this song, we can see that there's a repeat sign at the end of this second line, which means we go back and we play this whole section again. And then there's a repeat sign at the end of the fourth line, which means we go back and we play this whole section again. So already we can divide this song into an A part and a B part. But this doesn't just work for written music. If we take a chord progression and look at the same thing, we can see in this particular case that this song is divided into an intro, a verse, a chorus, a solo, a bridge, a different kind of chorus, and an outro. So we can take just this first verse here and we can divide it into two lines as well, and we can look at just the first four measures or just the last four measures in this verse. So you basically just want to take each section and divide it up into smaller musical phrases that make sense to you. And then we can take each one of those phrases and break them into smaller pieces or chunks. Psychologists literally call this technique chunking. And we do this with all sorts of information, from phone numbers to dollar amounts to words on a page. This is just the way that our brains naturally work with information. So here's an example of how this works. If we take a song, in this case just a really long list of chords, and we break it into smaller pieces, we can start to work with each of these pieces a little more easily. So if we just divide all of this in half, we can already see that we have two sections here. But if we divide each of these sections in half, now we see that the first two lines are exactly the same in each part here. These two lines are the same as these two lines. We can divide each of those lines in half into two-measure phrases, and we can even divide those two-measure phrases into individual measures. And now we see that this measure is just F7 to E7, and we can just practice that F7 to E7. So now comes the question, if we're breaking things into smaller and smaller pieces, how small do we go? And the answer is as small as you need to. If we're working on a song like Soldier's Joy here that's fairly easy and doesn't have that many notes, you might be able to work with two measures or maybe even four measures at a time like this. But if we're working on a harder song that has more notes, two measures may be a little bit too much for this. In this case, you may want to go for a smaller piece. It depends on your skill level and the difficulty of the piece that you're working on. But the bottom line is, it should be a small enough piece that it's easy for you to play and learn. You should be able to play through this several times without having to refer to the sheet music or the audio recording. Which brings me to my next point. Now, the real key to making this work is the repetition of each of these parts. We get a little phrase broken down into pieces, and we take that piece and we play it over and over and over again. That's what helps you learn and understand the piece more easily, and it's also what helps it stick in your memory better. If we just take the first little section and then we go immediately on to the second, and then we go immediately on to the third, well, guess what? You're back to playing the whole song note by note, top to bottom again. That's not what we want. Instead, take whatever small piece you've broken it down into and play that over and over and over until you've really learned it and gotten it. When it feels like you've got that part and it's sounding pretty good and you feel confident, do it a few more times. A game that I like to play with this, and I've done this since I was a kid, is to take each of these phrases that you're learning and just see if you can play it right 5 times in a row. Turn away from the sheet music and see if you can just play it from memory 5 times in a row. And if you mess up, well, you don't know it well enough and you need to play it a few more times. When you get it right 5 times in a row, then you can go on to the next piece. And it doesn't have to be 5 times, it can be 3 times or 10 times or whatever, but the idea is to have a target number to shoot for. That gives you a way to know if you know this part well enough. So after we've taken this song and we've broken it into smaller sections, and we then learn each of these pieces, we now have to put it back together. Take these smaller sections and glue them back into medium sections and practice each of these medium-sized phrases over and over until they become comfortable and musical. And then you can start putting these medium-sized phrases back into the larger sections of the song. But when we work from small to medium to large like this, we're still using just a handful of things at a time that our brain needs to think about, and it's still a manageable sized task. So as you're going through this process and you're learning new songs, keep in mind that the process won't look the same for every song. With some songs that are easier, we can work with a larger section at a time. Or songs that are more complicated, we may need to break it into even smaller sections than usual. Just use your own judgment and work in a way that's easy and efficient for you. And the most important thing to remember is if you're working on something and it's not going well, break it down.